My name is Leanne Trin. I'm an optometrist based on Larry country in the Northern Territory of Australia. You're listening to Talking Eyes. In this episode, we're talking about keratoconus, a corneal condition that affects millions of people around the world. Now, instead of speaking with a clinician or researcher in this field, I wanted to bring you the perspective of another kind of expert, someone who has lived with keratoconus every day for most of his life. My guest is Larry Kornhauser, one of the founders and the president of Keratoconus Australia. He's a leading advocate for people living with the condition here in Australia, and together we explore Larry's journey from diagnosis to surgery and the treatments he's had along the way. He shares his insights on what practitioners and the health system could also be doing better to support those people living with keratoconus. When did you actually first realise that there was something different with your vision?
I found out about my keratoconus when I was about 12. There was medical visits probably organised by the government or something at that time.
Yeah, like a nurse or a vision screening, was it?
Yeah, a vision screening, I think, yeah.
What sort of time period are we talking about? How long ago was this, Larry?
The mid-60s. And they came in and they got everybody to stand sort of somewhere near the back of the class and put up an eye chart, read it, one after the other, and I thought, yeah, that's fine. And then when it was my turn, I couldn't read it. And so they said, all right, you off to the side. Yeah. We'll deal with you later. And so, my parents were notified and I was sent off to an ophthalmologist and he said, you've got keratoconus, and nobody had a clue what that was. And he didn't really explain it. We asked him what could be done to stop any worsening of my vision. He said, well, I could give you, anti-growth hormones so you don't grow at all.
Stop having birthdays.
yeah, that sort of thing. And we just said, maybe we'll just settle for glasses at the time.
Keratoconus is a progressive eye condition that, for many years, had no effective treatment. In this condition, the normally round, dome-shaped cornea becomes thinner and it gradually bulges outwards into a cone-like shape. This alters the way light is focused and it causes distortion and blurred vision. It's more common than many people realised. Findings from a recent study, the Australian RAIN study, suggest that keratoconus might even affect as many people as 1 in 84. It typically first appears during the teenage years or early adulthood, and it progresses over time, sometimes stabilising by 30 or 40 years of age. For those living with keratoconus, the changes in vision can make everyday tasks like reading, driving, or even recognising faces difficult, especially as the condition advances.
Over the next few years, I was probably, 12, I was in year 6 or something, year 7. Over the next few years, I managed with these glasses, but probably with annual reviews, I was getting stronger and stronger glasses every time, but not wearing them full-time or anything like that. Until I was just thinking that I don't think I did even my VCE exams with any vision correction. The following year, when I went to university, everything changed. And then I was sitting in the big lecture halls and I started to see over the next few months, the first few months of university, that I just couldn't see properly. And, I'd hold my hand over one eye and could see that I couldn't see anything with that one. That was my left eye.
Based on what you're saying, like throughout your teenage years, the progression might have been fairly slow. Yeah. But when it really started to affect you was just in those early university years, and you were actually feeling like you weren't even able to see with your glasses.
And as I say, it went very quickly. I would say within the space of 6 months, I went from sitting, somewhere in wherever I wanted in the lecture hall to going, I can't see anything.
So what does not seeing anything mean?
In a education setting, it's you can't read the blackboard. So all distance sort of things at that point. I think I was driving probably.
Right, so that was in a condition.
So that was in March of that year, but by June I was going, I can't see anything. So it was very quick, and that's the problem with keratoconus, that people sort of don't perhaps fully understand that when it goes, it can go real quick in one eye.
And so what happened then when you realised that your vision wasn't working?
Well, it was back to the ophthalmologist who said, we'll probably need a corneal transplant at this point.
Right.
No mention of contact lenses.
Wow. I guess, no optometry back in that day was in some fairly early stages of evolution as well. So it would have been a tricky period for a person with keratoconus.
Yeah. So, as I say, the word optometrist was never mentioned.
Yeah.
The ophthalmologist had been prescribing the glasses, and probably I was seeing a general ophthalmologist, so I was referred on then to a corneal surgeon, I think. And the first one we saw was a very well-credentialed one, but getting on in years, and my mother and I both walked out thinking that his hands trembled a little bit too much to
be
think
performing
about
this sort of microsurgery.
So we got the name of another one, a fantastic guy named Dick Galbraith. We got him in his prime. He was just bubbling, full of energy, just ready to go. And I later discovered he'd also probably received a box of new sutures from America, these thin new sutures that were really going to transform corneal transplantation from then on. They were much, much thinner, and they could do much finer work and get better outcomes.
Yeah. He had these new toys to try out.
Yeah, he was very keen. He put up 4 fingers in front of me. I couldn't really see them. He said, you're legally blind. Come on, I'll give you a cornea. Was
that out of one eye or both eyes at that
point?
One
eye.
Just one eye.
The left eye was worse. And so he said, I'll give you a corneal transplant. And I was whisked off before anybody knew. But there was no information then, Nobody had a clue what was going on. My parents had no idea.
And I suspect a large portion of the medical community also were probably quite unsure about what was going on at that stage as well. In the 1970s, corneal transplantation in Australia was still very much an evolving field. Eye banks were only just being established, and patients often faced long waits for donor corneas. Surgeons relied on manual suturing with silk thread, a technique that carried a far greater risk of graft rejection and inflammation compared to the synthetic materials used today. Larry recalls what it was like in the lead-up to his potentially life-changing surgery.
I was fairly calm about it, but at the same time when I look back, as I say, the Saturday night, I had a big Saturday night with my friends because I thought, I don't know what's going to happen after this. And so I was whisked off on Monday morning to the Royal Melbourne, put under general anaesthetic, which they don't do anymore mostly. And I didn't wake up for a very long, long time afterwards, and because I was so tired from my weekend.
Yeah.
And
it was the weekend, not the anaesthetic.
But when I woke up, I was in the intensive care ward, and I was with all these like serious heart patients and really, really sick people. And that, you asked me how it was, I was, I guess, pretty traumatised by the fact that the people around me were dying, literally. The guy opposite me disappeared 3 days later, and I spent 10, 12 days there. And the other thing was that there was this belief that you couldn't do anything after a corneal transplant, that it was major surgery, you couldn't bend over, you couldn't lift heavy things, you couldn't basically do anything strenuous in case you popped your stitches. It was not an easy time for me, because then it took me away from my friends, my activities. I was still studying, but it was a big deal.
And did it do what it intended to do, which was restore your sight in that eye?
Well, I often say that when at the end of those 12 days, Dr. Galbraith came in and took off the bandages from the eye, and I could see, and it was like in a Hollywood movie, everybody started crying, and that whole thing.
It?
Yeah.
They really should be making a story on you, Larry.
I don't know, it was probably the same for everyone, but it was a moving experience. It was definitely an emotional experience to be able to see again out of that eye. But it was a long road after that, because then you go through, what it's still, I think, even up to 2 years before you get all the stitches out and before you know what your vision's going to be like. And that's when I was sent to an optometrist, who was the only guy in Melbourne. a guy named Tom Spring. He was the go-to person for keratoconus lenses. So he tried to fit a hard lens RGP on my right eye, which was my good eye. Mm-hmm. And I think we started with a soft one on the grafted eye after some time. And then we went forward into RGPs on both eyes. But they were hopeless. I mean, let me be clear.
Yes.
They would pop out all the time.
Yeah.
I walked around looking like a drug addict with red eyes. And, yeah, it was just so difficult. But, in those days there was so little information. I hadn't got to the stage in my own head where I was worried about any of this. I just thought everything would be fine. So I kept losing these lenses and I have to go back and get more, and sometimes I'd be driving, or like once I'd be, or in nightclubs, you'd drop them in the middle of a dance floor or something, they'd pop out.
Because you're in your 20s at this
Yeah, exactly.
This
I mean,
stage.
I was still trying to have fun, and once I was walking across a stream on a log and I looked to the side and the thing popped out. Oh. And I thought, oh no, I'm not jumping in there to try and find it.
Yeah,
But it was, I was trying to continue my life normally and deal with this situation with the contact lenses not fitting properly, hurting, and most of all, popping out all the time.
Do you know, let me tell you, as a clinician who does fit these lenses, that they probably are a lot better than they were in terms of design back in the 1970s, 1980s today compared to back then. But it is still really, really quite tricky to have a beautiful fit on such an asymmetric, such a conical sort of cornea. If you think you're actually fitting something that is much flatter onto quite a steep, what we call a cone. And so you do end up with the forces of the eyes blinking, the eyes moving, that there is lots of instability to consider. And I suspect back then they really didn't have the technology that they do now to deal with what you were experiencing. Your vision would have been so reliant on these hard contact lenses, and it would have been so beautiful for you to be able to see so well. Like, it's something that we all take for granted, that we can just see well. But for you, it really depended on this device. And the fact that device was so unreliable for you would have been so frustrating.
Yeah, it was. But I sort of took the attitude that I wasn't going to let it really stop me living my life. And I had in 1973, I think it was, I was stopped at a traffic light very late at night, and a guy had fallen asleep at the wheel and ran into the back of me, and I had this quite a serious car accident, and my whole uni courses got out of sync, and so I got, I think, 9 months off between the end of my final bachelor year and my honours year. And I travelled overseas then, and that was my first experience overseas. I was only 20. I can't even remember what I did, but I can tell you about all the good times I had over there. So I think the key message was that it wasn't stopping me from living my life. And that was, I think that's the important thing that really remains true about keratoconus. It can be extremely difficult. You can lose so much vision, but with these miraculous little bits of plastic in your eye, you can get very good vision, which is great. They just need to be fitted properly.
They need to be fitted properly. And, thankfully, we have a really, really good network of optometrists in Australia now who are quite capable of doing that. And we have the technology that we can access in order to create a lens which fits better, whether it's a small, hard corneal contact lens or whether we can use a bigger lens that vaults over the entire area to enable more stability, better vision. We're so fortunate now to have access to that. You mentioned earlier that there is a cost associated with this. And is there funding at the moment for patients who have keratoconus who need to access these devices? The
cost has become the major issue facing patients with keratoconus. That's probably the major issue that people come to us with, that where can I go and get lenses that I can afford? So many people say, there's no point in me going to get them because
I can't.
They're going to be $1,000 each, and I can't afford to pick them up, even if they can get the vision.
What's the range of costs that you've seen out there for? I know it's cheaper to have a corneal lens, which is a smaller lens, compared to a scleral lens, which I mentioned earlier, which vaults over the entire. So the cost range which you've experienced and people you've known experience, how much are we talking?
Oh, the RGPs. Depending where you get them, who you get them from, maybe $300 to $450 probably is the range. But and you've got to remember that the cost also incorporates the fitting costs, because the Medicare rebates to fitters is not high enough, so they lump a bit of their chair time into the cost of the RGP or the contact lens itself. So you don't really know how much that the lens is worth as such. But so around up to $450 for the smaller RGPs, and then it goes up from there. And there's the hybrid ones, the synergize, that will cost $800 to $1,000 each, and the same with the sclerals of the different types. And I've seen them up to $1,500 each, and I even encountered a patient a while back who was charged $5,000 for a pair of contact lenses. But I would say $2,500 to $3,000 a pair is not uncommon.
And I mean, it's not like a pair lasts you for life either. Quite often, like you say, if you lose a pair, which can be quite easy to do, or if you lose a lens, because there's a whole maintenance routine that's associated with keeping contact lenses. And so it's not just the cost of the lenses themselves as well, it's the cost of the solutions that you need every single day to make sure that you're putting clean, disinfected lenses into your eyes. And then the annual or by 2-yearly replacement that a lot of these lenses will require. So you may be up for, if you're going for the cheapest lenses, which are your corneal lenses, if they fit you, there's the cost of the consultations, partially bulk billable by Medicare. I mean, I know there are quite a few good practitioners out there who see healthcare as vital for people and will bulk bill their services. And that's a whole different conversation as well. Should these practitioners be bulk billing for their services, for their expertise, for their incredible expertise and specialty? Medicare obviously doesn't provide enough in terms of rebates for their chair time because it is a really complex fitting. And then the need to change these contact lenses regularly. And whether that change is just because of wear and tear or whether that change is needed because it's a progressive condition.
That's the real issue, is because it's progressive, particularly prior to cross-linking, people could have 2-3 changes a year of these lenses. So, to talk about $300, $400 for the RGPs before the more expensive ones came on the market could still translate into over $1,200 each in a year, just as the disease progressed. Are
there organisations which people can go to seek cheaper lenses, subsidised lenses? Is there a scheme out there that people can access, perhaps through the NDIS, which would enable people to access these lenses at a cheaper rate?
NDIS has been very difficult, and you basically need support from an ophthalmologist, like in a letter from a referral from an ophthalmologist to say this person cannot function, will be disabled without these lenses. And even then, it's an ad hoc sort of process. There's no clear pathway to go through into the NDIS. And we've lobbied for that through Vision 2020 Australia on the basis that you'll be taking, people off benefits and that very quickly if you can pay for their lenses, but nobody wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear that. I mean, there's a cost saving to be made.
Yeah, I know, but they don't see it. They're not running the NDIS like that.
Yes.
It's not for people with eye conditions. They say that at the state level there are clinics that can provide subsidised lenses, but they're mainly for people on health cards and, pensions, that sort of thing. Although those places like the Australian College of Optometry now, their clinic recently opened up to non-health card holders, so that's a place you can go. We cooperated with Melbourne University Department of Optometry to start a training clinic for optometrists in keratoconus back in 2006 because of what we saw as a need to train more optometrists at the time. But what's happened is that's grown into a regular corneal clinic or contact lens clinic for keratoconus. So we have in Melbourne here some of the best practitioners coming in to teach the students and fit the patients at I think they're offering a 30% discount on the lenses and bulk billing on the other scans and consults and what have you. So that's been something we've managed to do. That's sort of also available in some of like the University of New South Wales clinic, and Western Australia finally opened an optometry school, and I believe that clinic is also offering, more affordable lenses to patients there. But
that's really good advice, actually, the optometry teaching clinic. So there are schools in Western Australia, in Perth. There's a school in South Australia at Flinders University. Queensland has a school, the Queensland University of Technology. Even Canberra has a school of optometry. So if people are seeking more affordable care, then attending a teaching clinic isn't a bad idea because you do end up having access to some of the best contact lens practitioners in the country. How do you feel about how our current health system manages keratoconus? I mean, what do we do well and what could we be doing better?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the cost of treatments is not being done well, and we need to do better there, because if we can give more people access to affordable treatment, you're obviously going to get a better outcome. Keratoconus, I think, is a special area in eye care because, firstly, it hits large numbers of young people. It progresses during their most productive years, their education and early career, the years that they're creating a family. And so it hits them very, very hard. And at the same time, you need to be assisting those people because they're the future of the country, basically,
And the last thing they want on their minds is to have to manage a health condition, constantly go back to a practitioner, put up large sums of money and just constantly be reviewed. That's really, for any condition at that age, we just would prefer to just get on with it.
Exactly. But the thing about keratoconus is, unlike many of the other eye diseases, is it's fixable. And that's a wonderful thing. And I think I always tell optometrists, it's a great area to practice in because you're going to work with so many people like glaucoma or retinal disease or whatever it is, and all they've got is a decline in their vision and you can't help them much. But with keratoconus, they're young. Well, yes. But the thing is, you're dealing with young people with their future ahead of them, and you can help them.
And the trajectory is positive.
Yeah, you can actually help them and you can restore their vision. You can give people the sort of life that I've had, so they can get out, they can travel, they can work, they can have their families, play sports and all the rest of it, and get on with their life. Every night when I take out my lenses, I can't see anything, I really can't. I've got minus, 20 correction or something on both eyes. So I can't see anything, know. But in the morning I get up and I get these little bits of plastic pop in my eyes and suddenly I'm a normal person again.
For Larry, one of his greatest challenges has been finding specialists who will truly listen to him. Through his years in Paris and London, he saw many practitioners with varying degrees of success. But it was when an ophthalmologist said there was no hope for him other than another corneal transplant that he returned to Australia and met an optometrist that would change Larry's life in more ways than one.
My surgeon said, well, there's a guy here in Melbourne who might be able to help you. And that was a life-changing experience for me. I met the great Richard Voilet. He did something that nobody had ever done. I'd begged these people for years to give me glasses just to manage at night time to go to the bathroom or go when I was flying. I was doing a lot of flying.
Yeah.
And so I could take the lenses out and see. And he was the first one that ever said, okay, let's try it. All the others said, no, you'll never be able to see anything. It's not worth it.
And so spectacles made a huge difference for you because obviously when we do manage keratoconus as a clinician, what we're thinking about is, gosh, there's so much irregular corneal surface here. the only thing that can fix this is a hard contact lens, which sort of vaults onto the front of the eye and helps to manage that irregular surface, because spectacles don't really do that. Spectacles are fixed. There's no evening out of that corneal surface. Spectacles just don't do that. And then when you do prescribe spectacles, I mean, I can understand there's a lot of correction in there, potentially very different between the two eyes, that quite often people will look through these spectacles and throw up.
Well, that was my initial experience. I got to say, I almost did. And I would say to him, I can't. It's like crazy. They're so strong. He said, Larry, give your brain a chance. And within 3 months, I could walk around with them just like I'd with my contact lenses.
I'm amazed that you persevered for 3 months. That's wonderful.
It made such a difference to my life. You cannot imagine. And today, I think backup glasses are sort of considered a staple of treatment.
So how did you build up to this 3 months? Let's talk people through this, because, I mean, like we mentioned earlier, people put these specs on and straight away have this feeling of nausea, this idea that the world's spinning with the glasses, dizziness, just this incredible optical effect that's coming through, this information that's being passed through the brain, and then the brain just cannot figure it out and it's sent into the spin.
Well, I'd wanted it for so long and I could see there would be a benefit.
Yeah. So it's clearish, it's clearer when you pop these glasses on, except your body just can't figure it out.
Yeah, that's it. You get some level of clarity. I mean, like, as I say, I was doing a lot of long distance flying, and to be on a plane, to be able to walk up and down, sometimes it wasn't so great being able to see the food suddenly. But
sometimes there are things you don't want to see.
Yeah, but it just made it so much easier. And I've had discussions with other patients. You know, I was talking to a guy who said, I really need to find a glasses solution for when I'm travelling. He was travelling alone and he didn't have anyone to help him through the airports, and he was desperate to find that ability to wear glasses instead of his lenses. And
I mean, as an optometrist, can I just say that there are ways that we can sort of manage this adaptation period as well. We can start you off on something that's not quite as strong as what you actually need, and then eventually build up to, you know, the strongest or the clearest power that you require. That requires adaptation time. It's an additional expense, but it sort of can get people through that initial nausea and pain of adaptation.
Just on that point, after my cataract was removed, and so there was an adjustment in my vision in that side, we refitted my glasses, and first of all, he said he couldn't convince the lab in Germany to do my right eye because it required such a strong lens. And he said they've never done a lens that strong in that eye. And he put a blank in the left eye thinking I'd just be looking out of my right eye. But in the end, that was impossible for me to adjust to. The difference was so much. Yep. I just couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up even. Mm. And so, because I was getting interference from my vision in my left eye, and so he said, all right, what we're going to do, we'll put in a lens in your left eye that will completely stop you seeing anything in that. So actually I see worse in my left eye with my glasses.
I'll use this part of the episode to talk about your work with Keratoconus Australia, because it's incredible. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it, how it came about and how it's chugging along at the moment?
Look, Keratoconus Australia was really the brainchild in many ways of, again, Richard Voilet. He came to some of his patients, including me, and said, look, keratoconus patients are getting a really dud deal from optometrists. And, you know, there was this idea, you can find it in the literature, of a keratoconus personality where people with keratoconus were aggressive, anxious, depressive, and, you know, they were problem patients to have, and most optometrists didn't want to have to deal with them. And there are many, many studies about this question of is there a keratoconus personality? The conclusion is that these people have been so badly treated.
Absolutely.
That anybody would be in that condition, you know.
Yeah.
And so we sat down, and it really came out of a meeting we had one night. I met with about 20 of his patients, and because I had done everything and never I've had so many things. I could go for hours with all the things that have happened to me because of my eyes. But at the same time, I could tell you all the things that I've done in spite of my eyes, you know. And so I just thought, well, do we really need such a group? Everybody must be managing like that. And then I heard the stories. Oh, my God. And that night I just said, yeah, we have to do something for these people, you know. And so this very small group, we decided to get together, and they said to me, well, while we're registering, could you just be president just for a few weeks? And then we just started from scratch. Literally, we had no idea what we were doing.
And in technology back then, it was very different as well to what it is today.
It was zero. We had a telephone and email. And, oh, look, you know, I created a database, and we started putting names in, and you know, tried to spread the word among some of the optometrists and what have you that we were there, and get patients to register online. We created a website. Yeah, my cousin did that. And, you know, but it was just like that. It was just a whole group of people that had no idea of what they were doing.
Yeah.
No experience in this, just trying to do something. And it gradually grew, and we saw that there were things that we could do, and there were areas that we should concentrate on, and which is why about 6 years later, we decided to set up this clinic at Melbourne Uni to help train the optometrists and also get more affordable lenses. So that was the sort of thing that we sort of found out along the way that we could do.
Well, I mean, the beauty of it is actually understanding what the real world problems are, and then you guys managing to think about these problems and look for solutions as well, which is where, you know, this clinic at Melbourne University, a fantastic initiative, seeing that clinicians are actually inadequately trained and coming up with this Kera Club. Yeah,
well, Kera Club was a spin-off from what we used to call demystifying keratoconus seminars that we ran at the Australian College of Optometry for patients. We did them in collaboration with the Safe Sight Institute, who we'd just started to work with on their idea of setting up a cross-linking registry to track the outcomes of cross-linking operations. And so at first we were doing in-person seminars up there, which was great. And then with COVID, we moved online. And so now we're still doing those meetings online. What we do is we get clinicians to come in and talk about their particular area of interest. Stephanie Watson, who runs the cross-linking registry, it's now called the Keratoconus Registry, and who was probably one of the leading researchers today in the world in the field of keratoconus as a result of that registry, which was a world first. We insisted on to give them financial support. We said what we want is also quality of life data being entered into that registry so that the patients can give their views on how the treatments are working for them, and that's been invaluable. So they've reported on the quality of life data over the last few years, which shows that keratoconus can have a bigger impact than macular degeneration or some of the retinal diseases. And they're not, the key factor here is that they're not emotionally mature enough to be able to deal with something like that in general. And that's why we get such large mental health impacts from a diagnosis. You know, most of these other diseases we're talking about are older age diseases, and older people are more mature and able to adapt and process those sorts of things. Yeah. So that's the real issue, you know, for young people being diagnosed with keratoconus and losing their vision. I deal with some young people, you know, who have what the clinicians, their optometrists say, have very mild keratoconus. These kids are freaking out about the fact they can't see properly. And suddenly, you know, their perfect vision is not there anymore, and they're fearing the worst all the time. And it becomes a mental health issue then. Some of them have had cross-linking and therefore can hope to have very stable vision throughout their life, but it's their emotional development at that point.
Yeah. And there's something to say about the uncertainty of the condition as well. I think uncertainty for people is one of those things that really affects their mental health.
Yes, and that was actually, I look back on our original material that we were distributing to patients, and we would be saying to them, look, you're going to have a whole lot of questions, and we'd list all the questions that were obvious that everybody asked. And we said, the problem is that your eye carers are not going to be able to answer those because nobody knows what the answer is. And each person is going to have a different outcome. And even each eye in keratoconus will have a different outcome. You can have a good eye, or you generally have a good eye and a bad eye. And we don't know how either one is going to evolve. The biggest factor, I think, that has changed over the time I've been, a patient is eye rubbing. The recognition now that eye rubbing probably plays a big part in triggering and worsening keratoconus. And right through my life, nobody ever told me that. And my lenses were so poorly fitted most of the time. And I would take them out at night and go, boy, I'm just going to treat myself with a bit of an eye rub now. And probably when I stopped doing that, my keratoconus stopped progressing. Yeah. And the number of people I have spoken to who have just raged against their eye carers because they were eye rubbers and nobody ever told them. And they said, they've got eye allergies. Quite often there's a strong association between allergies, asthma and keratoconus.
Have you got advice to people living with keratoconus in their early stages towards their later stages? What's your general advice to them?
I like to tell them it's a positive story, that in most cases it is a positive story. It is not the end of the world. You can go online and hear about all these terrible cases and losing your vision, maybe even going blind, which is very, very rare.
One of the real game changers in keratoconus management has been the development of corneal cross-linking. Now, until recently, treatment was mostly about correcting vision as the condition got worse. But cross-linking is changing that story, slowing down and in many cases stopping the progression of keratoconus altogether. The treatment was first pioneered in Germany in the late 1990s. Researchers there found that they could strengthen the collagen fibres in the cornea using riboflavin, or vitamin B2, with a carefully controlled ultraviolet light. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Stiffening the cornea might stop it from continuing to bulge. Cross-linking is most effective in younger people or in those whose keratoconus is still progressing, because that's when it can make the biggest difference. And for many, it means the chance to avoid or delay the need for a corneal transplant. Cross-linking was a real game changer for keratoconus because it absolutely reduced the number of corneal grafts that people ended up needing.
Oh, they've dropped down to very low numbers from about 15 to 20%, now only to about maybe 5% of. Yeah. And some surgeons say they don't even see that many at all of their patients. So, but no, it's a positive story because I lived my whole life without cross-linking and I lost, minus 20. Some people say that's only moderate keratoconus, But, finding the right practitioners, getting lenses that work, you can live almost a normal life and people won't be aware that you've got a serious vision impairment. So I try and tell everybody, and particularly the young people I speak to, that it's a positive story. Don't see this as the end of your life by any means. There's a lot that can be done to restore your vision up to levels where you'll be able to do just about everything you want to do.
Thanks for joining me this season to talk cornea. There'll be a few extra resources linked in the show notes. I hope you found today's conversation valuable. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, follow and share my socials and the podcast with anyone you think might benefit. For my eye care colleagues, I've produced a special edition educational podcast for you. which will be available exclusively through the Optometry Australia and My Vision platforms. It's where you'll find a lot more technical jargon, but real clinical pearls to complement the season. Thanks for listening. This is Talking Eyes, and I'm your host, Leanne Trim.